very much for coming today. Culture Now is our series of lunchtime Friday talks with key figures from contemporary arts, contemporary culture. Really happy to be introducing our speakers today. Art consultant Lisa Schiff, who's based in New York, founded her company Schiff Fine Art in 2002, is a philanthropist as well, and we'll be talking about her practice today. Alongside Jane Morris, who's the editor of the Arts newspaper, of which you all have a copy on your seat. So thank you very much, both of you, for being here with us today. It's been a long, busy week during Freeze. Do stay on for after the talk, because we'll have tea, coffee and sandwiches, so we can have a further chat after our speakers have had a great conversation. So thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, and over to Jane.
Okay, well, thank you, and welcome everyone to the ICA. I think we shall sort of plunge straight in and ask, I think, the obvious question, which I'm sure many of you want to know, which is, what exactly does an art advisor do?
So many things. It really depends a lot on the collector. But I think, overall, one is to educate the person, to make sure they understand not just the artists, but also the art market, art history, the players, the fairs, the whole system, and it's a lot. It's like such a huge global environment now that I think it's really a lot to sift through. So oftentimes I refer to myself as a sifter of information to sort of help, guide people. I think probably the most important thing is to make sure that you're helping a collector or client figure out their own vision and not your vision. And that's actually probably the biggest challenge for art advisors. And that means really getting to know the person. And every person is so different, has different desires and goals. So I think, it's my job to really understand what's going to be, what is their long-term goal, short-term goal, and how can I best help them to realize what they need for them.
What kind of people are you working with? Because, I would imagine if I were collecting, that most of the fun of it would be doing the research and collecting myself. So why does somebody need to work with someone like you? Are we talking about people who are buying for an investment? Are we talking about people who are decorating their homes? Are we talking about people who are building a collection they want to give to a museum?
It's funny, it's a little bit of a combination of all those things, and when you say decorating and investing, I feel like those are bad words, which shouldn't be bad words. They're a part of what it is, and it's sort of a combination of investing, decorating, and collecting. And I think, there's a lot of pressure to pretend that you're just this serious, pure collector, and that you're bad if you're doing this and you're bad if you're doing that. But it's not the case at all, and I think you've got to combine all of these things. My collectors that I work with, I haven't actually ever built a corporate collection, which is okay, because I think that might be a bit boring and constrained, although some of them could be really fascinating. I've mostly had, private individuals. I actually have never done a foundation, but I'm talking to one now, which is a much bigger project. But private collectors all over the United States, you can't take on that many, so I probably have about a dozen, and probably half of them are active at any one time. And really that's, kind of at the limit. But they all have different goals. They all live with their art. Many of them are on the boards of museums. Some of them have interest in gifting their collections. And just because you hire an advisor, look, some of them have 5 kids and full lives, and they're not in New York City, they're in Boston, let's just use that as an example. And they don't have time to spend on the ground running the way that I do for a living. But I do have clients in New York who do have time and who are actually right there. And we do it together. It's a conversation. So it's not, I don't think an advisor is like, you have to do this, you have to do that. You want to teach them, and you want them to have their own relationships. It's not all about me and my relationships. It's them developing their own relationships. And I think that's the other sign of a good advisor. You kind of need to step behind and push the collector forward. It's not about me. It's about them. And not try to control so much. I think you don't need to control the situation or the relationship in any way, shape, or form. That if you have a really good relationship with your client, then you should have no worries whatsoever. If they're out without you buying art, it should be okay. So it really is more of a collaboration.
Do you have to give advice on things like tax and storage and conservation? I mean, it's not just about picking the art, is it?
Yes. Actually, I kind of like all that stuff. It's really interesting and it's complicated. And, you know, I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but one question I would ask if you were to ask, like, what's really important too is to have like, the longer you're doing this, the better you are at this. And so over the years, we've had every weird possible scenario happen, which has required us to hire really good accountants and lawyers. And it's
What sort of situation would that be?
well, tax issues.
Okay.
A lot of tax issues in the United States, which...
What, importing work in and out, or...?
No, actually, we have much different tax issues, and I have worked with collectors in Europe, so try to understand things going in both directions. And whether or not we have clients in Europe, we also bring things in and ship them out constantly. So, like, understanding things. But we've had to call the fish and wildlife, whatever, to get permits for things, and you know, but.
What's been endangered animals being
Yeah.
used in a work, that kind of thing.
Probably it's not so interesting here, but sales tax and use tax in the United States is quite complicated and it varies from state to state. And some of it we are responsible for collecting, the galleries are responsible for collecting. Some of it a collector's accountant is responsible for talking to the collector and having them volunteer it. And it's something that hasn't been done very often. It's becoming a huge problem. And there's a bit of a witch hunt now because certain tax things in the states have gone under the carpet for so long that, you know, it's as states run out of money, it's a place where they can go now and get revenue. And also in the states, it's actually really, you have to be very careful the way you set yourself up. Even if you are just a collector and not an investor, it's actually in your best interest to set yourself up as an investor on paper with your accountant for a variety of reasons. Which are kind of complicated and might be boring here, but so yes.
Do people expect you to build a collection that will make money? I mean, do they expect you to effectively not lose them money?
You know, I think the way I've gone in now is, you know, sometimes I'll interview a new client who's like, I don't care about investment. And I always giggle to myself because I think you will in 3 years when you ask me why this work has not gone up in value and your friend's work has gone up in value. And it's a real tricky balance. I mean, the sad thing is, I would say 5% of art actually goes up in value. And all we see in the paper is growth, 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 like this booming art market. I would say 95% drops way down or loses all value over time. And so you have to, and I find it a really important part of my job to educate about this. And I think the balance for me is not to get caught up in, oh, I want to show them I can build them a big money collection, because that's tempting, because I feel like I can do that. Like I can do that, and guess what? It feels really good when your collection goes way up in value, and they're like, good, Lisa. But, you know, you have to look at all the artists and all the artwork and just have an honest conversation about the numbers. I think what's complicated now is that if you look back to like the 1960s and 70s, contemporary art was $2,000, $5,000. Yeah, I know inflation and everything's changed, so you know we have to gauge it that way. But contemporary art is extremely expensive across the board. Out of the gate, we're talking like 20 grand for a young artist, and I find that really problematic. And it just is what it is now. So we just go slow and we really talk about it so that there's an understanding, so that there's no shock. If 4 years down the line, a collector comes to me and says, I'd really like to swap this work out. I'm not really liking it. It doesn't fit my collection. And I have to say, I cannot resell it. And the auctions don't even want it. They've rejected it. I mean, they're like, okay, well then take it to auction. It's like, no, that doesn't always work. I think the auction houses are flooded with works that they actually reject on a regular basis. You just don't see it. And oftentimes these are great artists that just don't have an auction history. So it's something to really, really talk about. And if that's a goal, if investment is a goal, that's okay too. There's a way to do it. I think you have to, if you're just purely investing, which we often call speculating, and that's bad too. But if you're just purely investing, I think it's okay. You just have to do it responsibly. I think you have And I have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing it with blue chip artists, older artists, not young artists.
Yeah. How do you make money out of this process? Do you get a fee on a cut of the sale? Do you get a fee? And how does it work?
It's a good question. It depends, again, on the collector and what they're comfortable with. Some people want to work on retainer so that, there's always a fear of, sort of shift. I mean, the art world's like the easiest place to do shifty business in on every level, shape, or form. You can scheme, you can go to the auctions and scheme, you could do whatever. You
negotiate a discount with a dealer and then sell it on to the artist.
You could
to
double,
the collector at full
you could
price,
lie, you could double dip it. You just, in this industry, you've got to be transparent. At this point, you're transparent. I think back in the days, in the 70s, in the 80s, maybe, not till that recently, before ArtNet, you didn't go into the auctions and write down in your catalog everything. You could just go buy something from auction, walk down the street, and flip it for like 5 times the price, and no one's ever going to know because there's no record of it. But there is a record for everything, which is not why I'm honest. I'm honest anyways. But you have to be transparent. You just must. But some people feel more comfortable with a retainer because then it's not such a transactional thing, and then it feels like you're advising, and that's one way. Some people just prefer to do a piece-by-piece basis. Generally speaking, for me, 10% is like a standard flat fee, and most of the time I negotiate that from the gallery side. And if I negotiate more, that gets passed along, if that's the way I'm working on it. When the margins get really high, the commissions drop down to low numbers. Like oftentimes, even if my contractual fee is 10%, let's just say I sold a painting last week that was expensive, and it was on the secondary market to one of my clients, and it was a little bit overpriced. We were paying a future price, but we really wanted it. And in order to get the sale done, I had to cut myself out, and it's fine. It's fine. It comes around, goes around. Just sort of work it out.
One of the big criticisms of many of the collections that are being built, that we often see appearing in public, being loaned to public museums, is that they're rather identikit. There's a kind of list of artists that you tend to see again and again, and art advisors often get blamed for this.
I have to say, I'm guilty, and I'm trying really hard. Actually, it's one thing I don't think you realize it until, it takes a few years, and then you suddenly go from one of your collections to another, and there's some striking similarities. And I'm really trying hard not to do that. The problem is, I actually, I think when you're doing this for a long time, you have like a small group of artists that you really fall in love with, and that you believe in, and you believe in the way their careers are being handled, the way they're handling their careers, the way their galleries are handling their careers, which is actually quite important to me.
For you, who would those artists be?
Oh God, you're really going to make me do this. I mean, for the past probably the past 5 years, focused mostly on Christopher Wool, Albert Olin, Wade Guyton, Kelly Walker, Rudolph Stingel. I mean, these are names now that I almost feel cliche saying out loud. But they were artists I really fell in love with. That at the time, it was really evident 5 years ago that Christopher Wool was undervalued and very, like a significant artist, a really important artist. And it was quite fun, actually, to spend time. I mean, it was like a real opportunity. And so I got so excited about it, and I couldn't help it. That enthusiasm will then, show elsewhere. I mean, my clients can sense when I love something, and then they want to understand it.
But does that mean all your clients have got all those artists in their collections?
Not all of them, but I put Christopher Wool's in as many collections as I could before the prices jumped. And on the one hand, I'm very proud that, we have like this. I mean, for me, he's a fantastic artist. I'm really happy that we have this body of work amongst my group of collectors. On the other hand, yes, when you go from one, there's a couple of staples, and then the rest you fill in. But it is something to really try to guard against. Yeah.
So how do you prepare? How do you find out about what's going on? I mean, how important is a fair like Frieze for you? Or are you much more interested in doing studio visits, or where do you find the fresh and interesting artists from?
I so appreciate the fairs. They're good for so many reasons. Like, it's really about walking around and having conversations with this is also what makes a good advisor and a good collector is you really need to know all the players. And so it gives you an opportunity to network and talk and catch up and have conversations. And you've got to keep your sniffer to the ground. That's how you understand what's happening. And so it's a way to keep your sniffer to the ground. I don't like buying at fairs, although I always do. I would much rather go slow. I would much rather go to galleries, buy from shows, go to studios, buy privately secondary market, like do the research and fill in like earlier works. I think sadly for a lot of collectors I work with who again have very busy lives, they like to come to a fair for a variety of reasons. I mean, coming to London is fantastic. We get to we get to go to the fair, we get to go to museums and galleries, we get to go shopping, go out to dinner. It becomes like a fun thing to do together. But especially I think it's getting a little bit better now. But in years past, when that air is so infectious, there's like an intensity to like make decisions on the spot, which I can't stop from happening on the spot. And I think sometimes mistakes can be made at our fairs. I try really hard to preview everything way ahead of time so that we know what we're buying before we even go in the door.
It's a bit like going to Waitrose when you're hungry.
Yeah.
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 And I think you described, this isn't the scenario of the moment, but you've described the fact that you have literally run down the aisles at art fairs, because although as an art advisor, probably there are dealers that will sell to you, particularly if very desirable artists will sell to you before they would sell to some unknown collector off the street. There are people that you still have to run for.
Yes, it happens. It happens. It's humiliating, but we're a full service company, so yes, if you really want something, we will run.
Now, which brings us on to Frieze itself, because the climate is changing a bit. There was rather less of the running than we've seen in the last few years. Nonetheless, we all keep reporting that at the very top, the art market is very strong. There's plenty of artists to supply this market. This is the kind of cliche. Is that true? How do you feel things are really feeling at the moment? We've had a couple of auctions the last couple of nights that have not done very well.
I don't think the material was great at the auction, so I wouldn't gauge the market overall by a shabby sale. We're in uncharted territories. This is like globalization and the internet and the franchise gallery system. It's all very slowly seeping in, and I feel like the market or the whole scene is just so enormous now that everybody always gets worried about having another 1990, which was when the art market really crashed and crashed for quite a while. But I don't know that it's possible for it, because it feels like there are many different layers to the market now, and it's so broad and so vast that I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, but in terms of supply, there's plenty of art. And there are plenty of buyers, but there's not that much good art.
I was about to say, is there much art that's worth even £20,000 or dollars, as you said, which is the out of art school kicking off point?
There shouldn't be like massive amounts of great art. Great art takes a while, it takes time. It doesn't just come out of the studio after your first year of graduate school. It also takes culture and history and current events and things that are happening in different pockets of the world for like great creativity to come out. And it's sort of like I look back now, okay, so looking at Christopher Wool and Wade Guyton and Kelly Walker and Glenn Ligon, and I can draw a line to Warhol and other great artists, and I feel like there's a loose historical movement, not related to each other necessarily, but to discuss about what they were doing. So when that happens for me, I'm happy. I want some grounding in history in some way. And so, there's all these young new artists that people are rushing for right now. And for me, it's too soon to see what it's about or where it's coming from. But in terms of really great art, I will say what's been interesting in the past 3 years is the primary market, because of the saturation of collectors coming in, and not just collectors, but collectors with their own foundations, like collectors who are willing to buy two, get one to the museum and buy one for myself, is that the primary market for some of these really great, who I think are going to be there for the long haul artists, has pretty much shut down. It's really hard to get access to the work now, and it's, so it's,
Who are the artists in that position?
Glenn Ligon, for example. I mean, if you want a Glenn Ligon, you should harass Martine here. Just to give an example, who's, like in the past year, his primary market has just slowly, and Wade Guyton, forget it. I mean, it's just, it's impossible to get in there unless you give an arm and a leg, and, you really want to put yourself on the line that way. And that's not really for everybody. Like I have a collector I just placed a beautiful Wade Guyton to, and she's very close friends with someone who has a massive foundation in Houston, and he said, she's like, well, where did you get your Wade Guytons? He said, I bought them from the studio. And I said, if you want to start a foundation, and if you would like to gift several to a museum in your local area, we can start that discussion, which, by the way, will take a while, or you can pay more and buy on the secondary market, which I think for her case is more appropriate, because it's not really what she wants to do.
Yeah, so buy it from a dealer who deals on the secondary market or at auction.
You pay more, but if you're gauging the market properly, then hopefully you're paying accurate.
And yet, at the same time, we have seen this huge proliferation of art fairs. I think many people in this room know that, 10 years ago there were very few. Now they are springing up like Topsy. Frieze Masters itself, there's Frieze now, Frieze Masters, there's Frieze New York, Art Basel has got its Miami edition, now it's Hong Kong edition, and we're expecting some of these other fairs some of these brands may open other fairs. Meanwhile, now it seems like every city's got an art fair.
Yeah.
So is this sustainable?
I suppose on some level it's sustainable. I find it a bit boring. It sort of takes the fun up, but then you just pick and choose the ones that are meaningful to you. I think there's a few that will stand out no matter what.
And which for you are the standout fairs?
I mean, Basel, Switzerland is probably my number one fair that I think usually the best material goes there. I think Basel, Miami is also a good fair, but I get a little confused there because it feels like Las Vegas, and it's like hard to focus. But there's relatively good material there. I think Frieze and Fiac. If I had to do 4 fairs a year, I would probably do those.
Yeah, because you're based in New York, aren't you? So,
I know. I'm so happy that we have Frieze New York. It was fantastic, but I don't really care about an art fair in New York City because every day is a fair there. Maybe you feel the same way in London. You have amazing galleries here, and maybe Frieze New York is great for Londoners to have an excuse to come to New York and see the gallery shows. And the good thing about a fair in a city like that is it does give impetus to the galleries to kind of plan their best shows around the fairs, so that when people come in, they do that. But I really think it's important to go to shows, to visit, to go to lectures, to go to museums, to go to studios, to talk to people, and to go slow. Go slow. And I think it's interesting that Frieze Masters has popped up.
What did you think of it? Is it a rival to Maastricht?
Not yet. It has potential. It has the potential to go there. It's just, it's year one, it's baby year, and I thought it was really great to have it here. I think it's interesting because you always think, oh, I'm onto a new idea, but then suddenly you realize it's like a global trend. But I keep feeling like I don't want to look at the young new right now. I kind of want to back up and go sideways and backwards a little bit. It's just the velocity at which a lot of it's coming at us is just, there's just this whole frenzy over certain artists, in the 5,000, 10,000 range, and then I'd rather sit back and wait until they're 50,000 and feel like I understand really what they're doing, and not just rush in because it's inexpensive. And there are certain collectors out there who, it's kind of the Saatchi effect. There's where it used to be like, wow, Charles Saatchi bought that, but Charles Saatchi buys everything. And there are a lot of collectors out there who run and they hear and they buy everything, and that's okay if you want to have endless storage, and it's good for some people. It's not really good for me or my clients, so I'd rather just sit back and watch a little bit and not get caught up in the.
How much do you worry about, we've written about the artists so-called made by the market, and I think the artist that probably sort of is the sort of epitome of that was the Jacob Cassé story, which you're probably all aware of. Basically an artist that very few people had heard of. Work came up at auction. It had 2 years ago. It had a low estimate of $8,000. It sold for $86,000, and everyone was like, "Who is this artist? Where did he come from? He hadn't had a museum show. He since has in fact here, but he hadn't had a museum show. And this seemed to be an artist who had indeed been made by collectors and art advisors. And is that a bad thing?
I think it is a bad thing. There's some bad aspects to it and some dangerous aspects, and this is sort of what I'm talking about with not rushing forward for the young thing that you hear the frenzy for too quickly. Because what happened with Jacob is, it's just the way the art world works. It's like little whispering, and I get a phone call, someone else gets a phone call. Did you see this? Did you see that? Go run over to Rivington, 11 Rivington. You got to buy this artist at $7,000. You got to go. And for a year, I will fully admit that many times I run over there and I just,
It should be added, this guy was a very young artist. He was 26 at the time.
Yeah, or 25. I think he's only 28 now. And so, of course, it just spreads like wildfire, and suddenly we're all running, and suddenly there's no work, and suddenly you have to give one to a museum, and then you can have one. And but at $7,000, everybody was like, okay, so we'll buy 3, we'll give 2 away, and I like to. He's such a perfect example because really this is shiny, flashy, fetishy work. It's really easy to like this. Like, how can you not like this? And by the way, they're stunning, and there was a beautiful show here. But it's sort of the Ansel Ryla effect. Ansel Ryla is an artist who kind of blew up before the market sort of adjusted in 2008, and it's shiny silver work. It's really easy to like it, and that doesn't mean that doesn't have substance to it. I mean, I think you have to think, okay, why is shiny silver work right now so interesting to us? Like, what is that about our society right now that we're all running so fast to get this work? But I would say the second this starts to get to a point where it's $100,000, $200,000, and again, remember, he's only 28 years old. He's had, in essence, probably 2 bodies of work that he's done. Like, how can you possibly judge this artist for posterity based on anything? So I would definitely not be interested in this at all at anything over like $20,000 right now, and I'm sure that's not even an option on any level anywhere. So I find something like this is dangerous for someone like Jacob, who is a very nice person and is, hopefully will have a long career ahead of him, but he's too young to be achieving prices like this. I mean, I'll just pick Christopher Wool as a counterpoint, or Sterling Ruby, but I want to say Christopher Wool first because one of the reasons that I felt so good about purchasing Christopher Wool and someone like Albert Oldham is that they're in their mid to late 50s, and they have been working for a long time, and their markets have grown really slowly. I mean, there were years where you couldn't give away an Albert or a Christopher. Now this guy's 28 and they're $200,000. It's just, there's too much room to drop. And it's actually, I'm sure, I hope, actually, I don't know Jacob really at all, but he's probably not happy about it because it puts him in a really precarious situation where he has a lot of room to fall. And it's a big problem for artists when their secondary markets fall far below their primary markets. I think when the demand gets like this, galleries often will have to raise the price a little bit, and sometimes they're at the mercy of the artist. The artist might be like, I want my prices to be $100,000. So if they raise the prices too high and then the secondary market drops, which I would guess with Jacob, it's going to fall off the map. And maybe I'm wrong, but that would just be the natural progression of things. So then, you're in big trouble. Nobody wants to buy your primary market stuff. And this is like a really, this is going to be a big problem for a lot of contemporary artists. Because when you go slow and steady, it's, you can actually wrap your head around it. If you have one bad sale at auction, it's not a big deal. If Jacob has one bad sale at auction and it doesn't sell, this is going to be the beginning of the end for him. So, then you get into the question of who's buying the work, how much do they own, and are they manipulating the market a little bit, which is also something that's possible. But I would put up another artist who's Sterling Ruby, who's...
Now, some of the same criticisms have been levelled against him as well.
Well,
not about him personally, but about his market.
Sterling, I think, is 40 or 41, so we don't say mid-career yet. Pre-mid-career, pre-midlife crisis?
None of us want to accept that 40 is middle-aged. Okay, he's kind of early middle-aged.
But he's quite a bit older than Jacob. But Sterling, out of the gate, in LA, I spent a lot of time in LA also. And so in LA, out of the gate, 10 years ago, 12 years ago when he was younger, his work was flying out the door, and it was trading fast, same thing. He has managed to really rise above it, and I would say probably his prices are still inflated for somebody of his age. The painting like this is trading on the market now for $500,000, and it's probably, I think on the primary market it would be 175, 200 grand maybe. But I think he's going to be fine. And that's because he's had enough bodies of work by now and enough institutional shows, enough articles written about him that if you really understand his work, it's good. There's meat there. So it is being, you start to understand who's playing in the market. So, sometimes there's some unsavories, we call them, playing in his market. And by
what's an unsavory? Maybe explain what unsavory is.
Unsavory, just someone who's just speculating, like they're just trading regularly. They're just, following the trends, buying low, selling high. But you don't want to do it with a young artist. If you're going to play the game, and this is why I say if you want to invest and you want to do it, there's a way to do it responsibly. You just don't want to do it with a young artist. You want to do it with someone who's undervalued from the 1930s, or something that you buy at auction, that's earlier. You just have to find a way to do it that's not going to affect someone's entire career. I.e., there's a lot of unsavories in Jacob's, path, and he has a lot to lose for it. And so it's really detrimental to these artists when people start messing about like that. So Sterling for a while has had, he's actually made what seems to me like to be one bad career choice after another. And yet nonetheless, I think his art is so good, it doesn't matter. He's going to be fine through all of it. But you really want to have a good gallery that you stay with for a really long time. Because even if you're like, oh, maybe
so isn't the gallery supposed to be helping somebody
yes,
build this kind of career?
You don't want to hop gallery to gallery. It's never good for an artist, because what happens is, a gallery is like a Hollywood agent, like a gatekeeper, and they do so much to, unless it's Gagosian, that's a whole other conversation.
I was just about to say, because Gagosian then steps in.
But a good gallery, a really good gallery, is going to nurture your career. Look, if your art is good, it doesn't, that's the most important. Number one, your art is great. A gallery can't make your art great. Your art is great. Then a gallery is going to make sure that you are being placed in the right collections, and that you're being placed in the right museums. They're going to guard you, and they're going to really, it's a really hard position to be in, but it's a really important part of an artist's career. And I think what happens when you go to a gallery like Gagosian too soon, which is a whole new model of gallery. It's like an empire with such massive overhead that you cannot help but have a highly fetishized sales environment. And when you have a highly fetishized sales environment, you really don't have a nanosecond to think about patronage or museums. You're making sales. So there's no nurturing there. And it works great when he does shows for Picasso. And it works great, it works fine for someone like Ed Ruscha, who doesn't, who has had all that nurturing already. But to go too soon is really a detriment to an artist. But so if you're a gallery and you have if you're a great gallery, you're taking care of your artist. Now if artists kind of like, ooh, I'm not sure it feels right here, I'm going to go there. Oh, I don't like this place either, I'm going to go here. And so Sterling has actually jumped around, in my opinion, way too much. And he's also let some kind of odd characters into his studio and start dealing out of the studio, which also alarms me. And for a while, actually, I didn't sell a single thing by him, maybe for 5 years, because I was like, something is funky is going on there. And it made me feel uncomfortable to place the work in the collections that I was working on. And now, even though he still doesn't have gallery representation in New York, I really like the work so much, so I've been placing it. But it's just a good example to see someone who's actually survived that kind of market manipulation early, and then someone who will have yet to see, it really depends on what bodies of work Jacob makes next. Like, if he keeps making silver paintings, I don't think it's really gonna, I don't know. So we'll see.
Now, I suppose I obviously don't know what kind of level the people in this room are collecting, or if they're collecting at all. But what advice are you giving your collectors at the moment? Are you telling people to be careful? You know, the bottom's going to drop out of the market. We can't live forever in a strange bubble where the very top of the art world lives in a different universe to everybody else, or?
I'm in a cleaning phase.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a cleaning phase, and I'm sort of going through all the collections that, because a lot of the clients that I work with, I've been with for a long time. So I'm kind of sitting down with everybody, and we're looking at what we've done, and like trying to tighten it up and make plans for like, how can we ground these more now? Like, okay, so if we have Christopher Wool, like, can we go sideways and buy photographs by him, buy prints by him, buy works on paper, go back to people that he was influenced by those works? Do we buy Richard Pousset art? Do we sort of enhance the collections in those directions? But I definitely want to go sideways and backwards a little bit more than I want to go forwards at the moment. I don't.
When you say backwards, do you just mean backwards in particular artists' careers, or do you mean as far backwards as Frieze Masters, for example?
I'm not there yet.
You're not there.
I'm not there yet. No, I mean more, not too far back. But I want to ground the collections a little bit and round them out. And
give them more artistic.
Yeah, but again, it depends on what everybody's desires and needs are. And
does that mean you're inviting some people to sell things at the moment?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
And is it a good time to sell at the moment?
It's not a good time to sell at the moment. Depending on what it is, but I'm not selling the things that would be a good time to sell right now. Because we're not doing it to make money. It's not that you want to show them, look, I'm making you money. It's that you want to say, okay, you have also in your collecting endeavor, you have also built another asset class, and your asset class has gone up in value. It feels good. It feels really good when you can do that. So there has to be a way to have a healthy balance of, having some of those things ground your collection, and then having other things that maybe aren't going to go through the roof, but that will be solid, that you could sort of, still build this historical thing. And so yes, we've looked. There are definitely things that I feel maybe we rushed into. I hate to say this, but every year I feel like I'm a little bit better at this. And some of these are things that I, when I was cutting my teeth 10 years ago, we bought, and actually, things that we bought during the 2005, 2006, like crazy intense, like buy, like, oh my God, look at this bottle, it's awesome. So I do think if you're hiring an advisor, the longer they're out in the field, the better they are at this. The more mistakes you've made, the better you get at this.
Do they forgive you your mistakes?
Yeah, because we make them together.
Yeah.
We make them together, and we liked, and we still like some of these things. It's just, I think one of the problems today is, if you were collecting 30, 40 years ago, the pace at which work was introduced to you was like glacial. I mean, it was so slow. And you collected slowly, maybe about one or two things a year. And now we're presented with new work every day. I have galleries calling me every day. I think so-and-so should look at this, and so-and-so should look at this. And then there's a new art fair, and then there's an auction, and then there's, and people are collecting at a much faster pace. And people are outgrowing their walls in 2 seconds, and then they have tons of storage. And it's, not everyone's going to set up a foundation, and not everyone's going to gift to a museum. It's just not the thing to do. So we are in a new world now where there are going to be sales, period. And it's like, it's a hard thing as an advisor too, because galleries don't want to hear about resales. You just want to build collections that go on endlessly, and they can't. So there has to be a way to resell, but resell responsibly. Get in touch with the galleries. I think really good galleries actually are great about it. Some galleries still have like that old school like guilt. Well, I'm not giving you anything else if you sell this, and that causes problems because then you go underground, you go on the secondary market because you don't want to be penalized for it. But I think it needs to be very transparent. I really do. I think galleries need to be really okay about this, because then they're going to get all the work back and then they can handle it responsibly. But I've also had galleries say, I don't want it back. I don't have a market for it, and I think it's not a great time for a lot of sales. But I think that's probably par for the course. I think honestly, it's always about 5% of things that really sell well, and 95% that don't.
Well, on that note, I think that's a sort of fascinating point, because we all sort of know it's true, really, but it's not what's widely discussed. We've reached the 45-minute mark. I'm sure you're all bursting, she said, with questions. Well, in fact, you are bursting with questions.
Yeah, I am. Lisa, just to draw you more, it's really just to get your views on more emerging and middle markets, but this is more a question also about insecurity and fashionability and buying as opposed to supporting artists, and just this sense of brand, which is so huge now. So I just want to get your view on your reading of this very moment again, based on how do young artists get through this. Everyone is buying heavily at top end on secure brand. No one is going to take any risk. Is there a new story at the moment where we're seeing huge volume of trading in art of late, but only in certain areas and in certain ways? Is there a collapse of the middle market, and how do young and emerging artists even reach that when there might be a volume of trading, but at the end of the day, not much of that is making sense or supporting?
It's a really good point, and I think you're absolutely correct. I think there is a bit of a collapse at the mid-level, and I feel like it's really recent. But suddenly there's again a very few tier of artists that are doing very well, very tradable. No art is liquid, but slightly liquid.
What are you considering the middle in terms of artist price, that kind of thing?
Probably it could range. It could really range. Probably $250,000. I don't know what's going to come out of that. I do think young artists who experience a quick surge, should hopefully have really good gallerists that they're listening to that are helping them stay grounded about it. Because I think sometimes you can get caught up in the frenzy of it, and it happens constantly. It's like shh, and then people are on to the next new thing. I feel like there's a really big push towards new, the next thing, and I really don't want to kind of touch it. And I don't mean to be unsupportive at all. I try to really be supportive in not-for-profits on the side. That's my way of making sure that I'm giving back, and all of my clients are, not all of them, but a lot of them are really heavily involved on boards and stuff, so they try to do the same thing. But I do think there is an interesting phenomena right now, and I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question or what will happen. But it is a bit disconcerting, I think.
It feels like there's a disconnect between what's feeding the market at this point, because people won't take the risk to support things even if they don't work, and also you're coming across certain breeds of artists that are extremely ambitious, who actually court that kind of energy and push for higher prices and private jets and so on.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes that doesn't come from the market. It
comes from the artist.
Or it can come from the artist.
I agree. I find it very dangerous, actually. I don't really see a good outcome for that kind of behavior. I think there's just it's, what is that, Icarus flying too close to the sun? You're just going to fall. Eventually. I don't think but it's interesting because there's this corporatization, there's sort of like a mini sustainability of it on some level, but I don't think in the long run it will sustain itself. And I do think we're in a weird transitional period right now, and I can't quite, I think it's actually been making me uneasy because, there are times where I feel like I can really see things very clearly on what I think, who I think, I should look at, and right now I feel it's very murky, and so
What do you mean by transition? I mean, I know what you mean by transition, but from what to what? What's making you nervous?
It's just, for me, like a historical moment of a group of artists that I've been working on has been bookended by some museum shows, and I feel like, we're moving on to the next phase in history, and I can't clearly see what that phase is, because there's a lot of mishigas in the market, and that makes it, for me, hard to read. It's like going to Miami Basel. It's like a little Las Vegas at the moment. So, it's like I have people running up to me yesterday, you gotta go buy this artist, you gotta go buy this artist. And I walked around and I looked at all of it, and I was like, I just you know, I'm just gonna like slow down. I just want to slow down, and that's all I can say. My reaction to all of this is, I just am taking a back seat a little bit to watch, because I kind of don't really feel like I have a clear handle on it, and I'm curious to see how it'll play out.
Sorry, the lady in the yellow, and then.
Do you have a personal collection?
I do, but it's a bit of a bummer, my collection. I'll tell you why, because I usually, you know, hang things on my walls, and if a collector that I work with comes over, I like that. I want that. So I often lose my collection. I mean, there's a young artist that I quite love from LA named Alex Israel, and literally I just having a baby. So I picked out a painting for his room, not to be decorating, but I was. And you know, I bought it from the show that hasn't yet opened at Almin Rec in Paris. And one of my clients saw it in the, you know, I had sent it forward, but you know, no one responded. So I was just like, well, I'm gonna. And she's like, I want that. So you know, it's like I buy it and then it's gone the next day. So I try though. I do try. It's an occupational hazard.
Stephanie?
Just a quick question about how long have you felt like slowing down? This feeling of wanting to slow down and step backward.
6 months.
So it's recent.
Yeah, it's making me really nervous too, because I just, you know, I'm sort of free floating for the moment, but not in a bad way, just in a curious way. Not quite, like the horizon's not clear right now.
Is this because of so many artists emerging from different countries, or?
I think it's because I
Or
really.
is it there's a political shift, you think, going on?
Personal?
Yeah, it's personal.
No, you know what? I think it's partially personal in the sense of the artist that I was really interested in working on. I feel again like this historical moment is kind of ending, and it's really important for me to fall in love with some artists who I believe have historical relevancy. You know, I really care about that, and so I talk to curators all the time. I go to the shows. I really want to understand what's happening. I try to keep up on politics and economics and see what's happening. And I think part of it is that the current situation, you know, could be part of it could be the election in the United States. You know, we're in this kind of in-between phase. But there is a wave of new art coming out, and I don't quite feel it as like it's that great. So I'm longing for some like clarity on what I want to look at next.
Do you have an opinion on relational or dialogical art? What's your opinion?
Relational aesthetics, like.
Yeah.
You know, I never really collected too heavily into it, not because I didn't like it. I quite like Rick Ritt and Philippe Perrino, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
I like Liam Gillick. I like those artists. I've placed some of them, yeah. But in terms of like where that's going or where it's at right now, actually I was reading an interesting, weird interview with Sterling Ruby where he said it was dead, but I can't regurgitate why again. I do feel like we're in a heavy abstract painting phase right now, so I don't know that that's like sort of like just a trend though.
So you don't feel like there's too much like object-based art and there's like generally too much art in the world right now?
I don't believe there can be too much art. Art enriches us. I mean, good or bad. I'm glad that there's an outlet for people to be creative and I think really good art helps us see what's invisible. It makes apparent to us things in the world that aren't so evident. So no, I don't think there's too much.
We keep hearing that the level of private treaty sales amongst the auctioneers is growing year on year. It's constituting more and more of their revenue. And I assume that a certain amount of that is as a result of the need for discretion. Is that making your job and the job of people like you, there are more and more opportunities for buying works of art on the private network? I mean, as the secondary market, the auction market starts to move over into private treaty sales, is that an opportunity for you?
I love private treaty sales.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just another connection in the world. You always, it's really fun to go hunting for things. And so, you end up making all these contacts in the art world, and then they're like, oh, I know Lisa likes blah blah, and so I'll get a phone call from Christie's or Sotheby's or saying we just got this thing in, or I'll call them and you know, what do you have? Like I like to look and see what's out there. I mean, right now I haven't really been buying at auction because I don't see deals on the things that I'm really interested in buying, or that my clients are interested in buying. So private treaty sales are nice. Yeah, discretion is a good thing.
But what I meant was, as it becomes more and more expensive to sell through the auction rooms, is that making more opportunities for art advisors?
Because their commission levels are so
Yeah.
high? You know, no, because if my clients wanted to buy at auction, we would buy at auction. Like I don't, you know, I'm not a dealer, you know, I'm advising people what to buy. So if I see something great at auction, I mean, we try to buy at auction often, but you know, we usually get outbid or we won't go up to a certain point. And auction houses have to add their same large commission onto a private treaty sale, and I have to add mine. So it ends up kind of being the same. I mean, there's more wiggle room to negotiate in a private treaty sale, so I don't really feel like that's helping or hurting me in any way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Supplementary question. Do you sense that there are more and more people like you coming into your section of the market? Do you think art advisors are proliferating? What are the implications of that for you?
Well, honestly, there's so many collectors to go around. I mean, you cannot take. I mean, I probably have a dozen, and I don't have, you know, like I mean, I would say yes probably to the right one, but it's a lot of time to help one person. So it's not like, you know, I think as the market expands and it gets much more complicated, that if you can find a really good advisor, I don't see how, you know, I know that sometimes it's looked down upon, kind of, oh, you need an advisor. But I mean, we help on so many levels. Like, by the way, shipping, taxes, installation, it's a pain in the ass. You know, it really is a lot, you know, it costs a lot to be a collector. Like having a dog, you've got to feed it, you've got to conserve it, we do museum loans. I mean, it's just like we take care of a lot of stuff so that you don't have to be bothered with it. And also, I just cut through. Like, I just cut through the cheese. I'm like, okay, this guy is unsavory, but he has good stuff. Let's go talk to him. He overcharges. But he's got this thing I want. You know, let's go look at it, and you know, I can explain the landscape a little bit. Where, you know, that's from doing this for 10 years. That it would take a long time to figure out that you're talking to someone who's like a bit of a shyster, which there's a lot of shysters around, which is okay. We still have to do business with them. So no, I think I think there's plenty to go around. But yes, I do think it's sort of a weird job in a weird way, you know. And suddenly they're everywhere. And I think there's a lot of dilettante ones. I fancy myself a little better than that.
I think on that note, we'll probably wrap up. But do stay for tea, coffee and sandwiches, and I'm sure Lisa will be more than happy to answer a few further questions. I apologise for the noise next door. I hope it didn't detract too much from what was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Lisa and Jen, for really